that EGROW is organizing on the Trump tariffs and Indo-US trade. As you know, that EGROW Foundation generally holds its webinars on Fridays, and we have done nearly 290 webinars so far since we started after COVID. But because this issue is so burning and we did not have any Friday slot till end of November, we are now doing this on a Monday. I want to thank each one of you for having agreed to come at such a short notice and be part of this exercise to understand from the experts as to what is happening on the tariffs and our economy. I must also mention that, as you are aware, EGROW Foundation is a research-based policy think tank located in NCR region, and we are always aiming at research-based policy advice and research-based thinking on contemporary issues. Very different from a journalistic viewpoint, and that is why we thought on this important topic, we invite the best minds from across the world. Dr. Joshi, Rakesh Mohan Joshi. He's a professor and most importantly, Vice Chancellor of the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade. And we thought that he is sitting at that premier place. It's a premier B school under Ministry of Commerce, Government of India. And he should chair the session. And in Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, there are experts sitting in the negotiating team. I had the privilege of listening to him just 2 days back. I was very impressed on the sharp thinking that he has on the subject. Professor Veeramani is the director of Center for Development Studies. He was early the professor at prestigious IGIDR in Mumbai. And Professor Veeramani is considered in our country is an expert on international trade. We have had the privilege of listening to him at various places. He has come and delivered his talk at EGROW. We also have Professor Kishore Kulkarni. Professor Kishore Kulkarni has spoken on this topic in the US in media. And when I heard him, I was very impressed. He's a distinguished professor in the Department of Economics at Metropolitan State University of Denver. He has been teaching there since 1989. And I have had the privilege to listen and participate in various webinars along with him. He's the author of a number of books, 9 books to be precise. Dr. Sweta Saxena, a dear friend, when we met at IMF, and she brings in the most rare quality that she is from India. She thinks, breathes India. She visits India regularly. Even today, she's at Vrindavan. She has worked at BIS. She has worked at the IMF. She has worked on the Africa desk, and she was the Chief of Staff and the Acting Director of Gender, Poverty and Social Policy Division at the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Before that, she served as the Chief in the Macroeconomic Policy and Financing for Development Division at the UN ASCAP in Bangkok, Thailand. I think she brings a variety of expertise. Being from India, having worked at the IMF, seen a global picture, worked at ASCAP and took a regional picture, and then as the Chief of Staff in the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, where we, India, are talking about Global South. Our Prime Minister discussed about it in the G20. She brings a very well-rounded perspective for us. And that is why we invited her from her place in Vrindavan, where she has gone recently, to speak to us on this important issue. With this brief introduction of each of the speakers and the topic, which is very, very important, as Professor Rakesh Mohan Joshi set the tone by saying that it is America which is deciding what do we spend our time on. I think he set the tone so well. I hand over the session to Professor Joshi to take the proceedings further. Professor Joshi, over to you.
Thank you. Namaskar, Professor Charan Singh ji, for giving me this, wonderful opportunity. And I am surrounded by, the top experts, Professor Veeramani, Professor Kulkarni, Dr. Sweta, and very distinguished participants of this, very timely webinar. We are living in such uncertain time that something which is only certain is uncertainty. And which we are looking at, almost every coming day as to, what a country's strategy has to be, because, tariffs started, changing from the Liberation Day on April 2nd with, multiple, deadlines. And we have gone from, the concept of MFN tariff under the WTO to concept of reciprocal tariff, to concept of differential tariff in the different countries. So I think the whole game of international trade is absolutely changed, and economists are absolutely rattled as to which theory to use, which calculation to use. I am sure that most of us are using a lot of simulation models, but the assumptions that we are taking is also changing every day, and the country's competitiveness is also changing every day. India was one country which we thought that America will sign that deal probably first with India, but I think enemies have to be worried, but now friends have got worried. So nobody knows that what is going to happen, and what is today, will it exist tomorrow or not? And therefore, the differential tariff on the differential countries is, making the competitiveness of our products changing every day. So we are absolutely not sure. So even now, if we consider that things are settled, we are not sure that, when things are going to change, and which are, certainly going to change in time to come. Because now I think we are living in a era of real dynamics. Like, 10 years before, when I was teaching pricing was fixed. Now the pricing have become dynamic. Earlier, 20 years before, when you used to book an airline or a hotel, price were stable. Now it is dynamic. The same thing is coming for tariff. Everything is getting dynamic. And something which worries me a lot is that, India is a dead economy. So a country whose progress is 6.5% growth rate is a dead economy, and a country whose economy is less than 2%, 1.8 or so, that's a vibrant economy. So I think let's deliberate on that. And I think a country with 1.46 billion people is a dead economy. So I think we need to, and things are differentially, giving the market access. And it was the tariff, but we do not know the secondary tariffs or the penalty being imposed. We are not aware of, but it is also again changing. So I think I'll reserve my comments for the last, and I think we have got great researchers with me. So I will, Professor Veeramani to first take the, stage, and I think Professor Veeramani ji, आप अपना बताइए. You can, go ahead with your presentation, or your this thing. So we start with Professor Veeramani.
Thank you, Dr. Joshi. So, and thank you, Dr. Charan Singh. So I will share my slides. Is this visible to you?
Visible.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. So let me, so first of all, thank you, Professor Charan Singh, for inviting me for this topic, which is very close to my heart, something that I have been following. So I thought I will first talk about some of the very basic facts, because this is important, because these days these facts are being completely ignored. not just in US, but also even in other countries which are, kind of responding to this threat from Trump. So one, I want to make some points about what trade is and what it isn't. So one important point, and this is mostly based on a very popular article written by Paul Krugman, who is a Nobel laureate. He has written this article in Foreign Affairs long time back in 1994. So this is not in response to Trump, but then this becomes very relevant today. So the one point that he's making, which is very important, is that nations are not corporations, which means that countries do not compete in the marketplace the way firms do. That means there is a kind of misunderstanding among many people, including even sometimes even among economists, and of course sometimes among policymakers, that there is a kind of confusion that when you talk about international trade, they somehow relate that to a situation in which two companies are competing for a market share in a given product, like Airtel and Vodafone. Let's say that they compete for telecommunication market. So if Vodafone gains market share, that means Airtel lose market share. So generally, there is a tendency to relate that type of a competition with international trade. That is fundamentally wrong. That's exactly the reason why a lot of these things are happening. Trade war is happening exactly because of that logic is getting applied. And Trump, being a businessman, he is applying that business logic. And he doesn't listen to economists, because economists think about trade in a completely different way. And he doesn't listen to them. And therefore, he's applying his business logic to an issue which is very different. It is not like two companies competing for a given market in a given product. That a trade is completely a different thing. Second thing is that the living standards of a country, the people in a country, depend on productivity growth. That's a fact. So national prosperity is driven by the growth of domestic productivity of that country, not by outperforming other countries in exports. So even if you outperform other countries in exports, if your productivity is low, you can outperform other countries in export by giving export subsidies or manipulating your exchange rate or whatever. But that doesn't mean that you will have the best productivity. The country with the best productivity has higher wages, and therefore their people have higher per capita income, higher standard of living. That need to be thought about. So if you outperform another country in terms of export, there is no guarantee that you will be the best country or the which assure better living standards to its people. The third important point is that a trade is not a zero-sum game. Both countries, whenever they participate in trade, they gain, each of them gain from trade. These are standard thing, but it is important to repeat it, because these very basic fundamentals are often forgotten. And that is why most of the time these type of issues come up, trade war and all what we are facing now. The countries gain from trade because it allows them to import goods and services they cannot produce efficiently. So generally, we consider import as a bad thing, right, in all these discussions. But the fact is that in basic understanding of international trade theory, I can't see any international trade theory I have studied which says bad thing about import. It always says that you gain from import. How you gain? Because you are able to get things from other countries which you cannot produce in the same efficiency level. So you are gaining in that process, and you exchange that import with your export. So that is basically the fundamental logic that we all do in our day-to-day life. Everybody as an individual do, states do, districts do, villages do, countries do. So the logic is the same. The last one is that gain from trade comes from efficiency, not dominance. The true benefit of trade lies in the more efficient allocation of each country's productive resources. So these are very fundamental things. Many of us know it, but sometimes we forget it. So I thought that it is important to highlight it here. Now, another important thing, again, basics. This is about trade balance. What is trade balance all about? Because this is all now, this discussion is all about trade balance. So Trump somehow wanted to correct the trade deficit problem that the US is facing. So Krugman in his article shows that a trade surplus can reflect domestic weakness, such as low consumption or investment. A country which is running trade surplus can actually, and there are many examples of that. Theoretically, it is true. There are empirically also, there are many examples. Country with a trade surplus can experience low consumption. And if your people consume less, any standard economic model says that your welfare is low, because your welfare is associated with the level of consumption that people can do. Or investment, like, if you are investing less than you are saving, that country will be running a trade surplus. If your investment is less than your saving, that means from a macroeconomic identity point of view, that country is running a trade surplus. So trade surplus is not generally, need not necessarily be always a good thing. Similarly, a trade deficit is not always a bad thing. It can signal strength. Like when a country has a robust investment, it invests more than what it saves, then it will run a trade deficit, current account deficit. This is again a macroeconomic identity, which cannot be questioned because it's a mathematical relationship, right? So similarly, when there is a strong domestic demand, that time of also there can be a trade deficit. So examples are plenty. Like for example, US has run a trade deficit since 1982. Yet it outpaces surplus running countries in terms of growth rate. Like from 1982 onwards, US has running a current account deficit. Now, if you look at the average real GDP growth of US during 1980 to 23, a long period, US economy grew at 1.8% per annum, and this is a country with a current account deficit during that period. Germany, which experienced a surplus, grew lower, at a lower rate, 1.4%. Japan, which also experienced a current account surplus during most of this period, also grew less than US. So that means that when you run a current account deficit, it doesn't mean that you grow less. The experience shows of these large countries shows that it is just the other way around. Now, another good example is Russia's trade surplus surged immediately after the Ukraine war, a symptom of crisis, not strength. Like, nobody would say that Russia is a strong country now in terms of its economic performance. So, but it is running trade surplus. So this is another important thing which need to be told again. These are basics, but I wanted to tell this, and then I will come to more India-specific issues and all, tariffs and all. Another important point, again related to trade balance, is that we know that in a closed economy, saving is equal to investment. So S is equal to I. For investment, I have put by mistake S, but that is I. So S is equal to I. Or other words, in a closed economy, production is equal to consumption. These are fundamental macro identities. But in open economies, investment can be different from savings. Whenever investment is greater than saving, there is a current account deficit. Or whenever domestic demand, that is consumption, is greater than production, so demand greater than supply, that is also current account deficit. Current account surplus means the other way around. Investment less than saving. Is that a good thing for a country, that it invests less than it saves? That's what current account surplus means from a macroeconomic identity point of view. So what happens is that, what is Trump's problem? Trump's problem is that the manufacturing sector in the US is declining. Its share is declining. Now you can very much explain why this is happening. This is happening because the US has been running current account deficit for years. So that means basically the US demand, that is consumption, is above its production in that economy. So in an economy which is already operating at a very close to full employment level like US, so part of that higher demand, because the US demand is higher, C is higher than production. So when C is higher, that means the households are demanding all kinds of things, manufactured goods, agriculture products, and non-tradables. So So part of that higher demand is for non-tradable goods. So, and therefore, production has to expand because of the higher demand. Supply has to expand to meet the increased C. So when supply has to expand in a in an economy which is fully employed, then you have to take resources away from other sectors. Then only you can increase your production. So from which sector you will take resources? So you will take inputs, including labor, from tradable sectors like manufacturing. Why? Because your non-tradable demand is increasing. When non-tradable demand in the US economy is increasing, you have to produce more non-tradable. Now, in order to produce more non-tradable, as the economy is already operating at a close to full employment level, you need labor. And you take that labor from manufacturing sector. Then what will happen to manufacturing sector? It will shrink. Manufacturing sector will shrink. And a non-tradable sector will expand. And we know that is happening in the US. Non-tradable sector has expanded. Manufacturing sector has shrunk. And when manufacturing sector shrinks, you need manufactured products for consumption, household level consumption. Then you have to import from other countries. So on merchandise account, you will experience a trade deficit. This is not a rocket science. This is a simple macroeconomic relationship. And if somebody understands this relationship, there is nothing much to sleep over, like, nothing to lose sleep over this issue of a trade deficit. And anyway, the economy is doing well for so many years, as we have seen the growth rate. So that is another issue. That finally, again, basics about tariff. Tariffs do not necessarily push the balance between investment and saving or consumption and production in one direction or the other. So basically, Trump is trying to change this investment saving relationship or C and P relationship. That will not change. That is how the deficit can be removed. So tariff do not improve trade balance or manufacturing employment. There is no theory which shows this. So tariffs means currency will appreciate. If more tariff means the US demand for foreign goods will decline. When US demand for foreign goods will decline, the demand for foreign currency declines. So dollar will appreciate. And if dollar appreciates, export will fall and import will increase. And trade deficit will only worsen. So it is not going to address the trade deficit problem. Then there is also this very well-known Lerner symmetry theorem, which says that import tariff act as a tax on exports. That means a tariff on imports is just like a tax on export. So when you say that you are imposing 10% tariff on something, indirectly you are taxing your export, which is particularly true in a world of global value chains, where products are manufactured by importing parts and components from various parts of the world. So whenever you impose a tariff on imports, it is indirectly a tax on your export. So with all these, it doesn't work. Now let us come to some data. Come to India. What should India do in this type of a scenario? So that is a question that I wanted to look at. So in this graph, what I have shown is on the left hand, on the vertical axis, I took a ratio of 2 shares. So this is for India, China, and Vietnam for a comparison purpose. So what I have taken is that I take the share of India or China, whichever country that I have considered here, share of India in world GDP. What is the share of India in world GDP divided by share of the same country in world population? So we know that India's share in world population is close to 18%, 17.8%, close to 18%. But our share in world GDP is 3.5%. So even though we are a large country in terms of population, we are not so large in terms of GDP, global GDP. So if you take the ratio of these two, now if your share in world GDP is less than your share in world population, this ratio will be always less than 1, right? And we see how this ratio has evolved over time. Look at China. For China, this ratio has reached 1 by around 2020. That means China's share in world population is equal to China's share in world GDP, which is a remarkable achievement. That means each person in China, they are producing something equivalent to their, their existence, like, their labor productivity is so high. And that is why they reached that 0.1. Vietnam, you can see it is going up significantly. India is also going up, but slowly. And we have a lot of catching up to do. So why I am saying this is because we have a larger purpose of achieving Vikasit Bharat. That means becoming a high income country. Now, if you want to become a high income country, the gap that we see here between China and India need to be bridged. That gap is enormous. This gap is what need to be bridged. Then what it means is that each one of the population in India, each person in India will produce proportional to the share, their share in the world GDP. So that means our share in world GDP should be equal to our share in world population. That much our productivity, labor productivity need to improve. So if we want to achieve Vikasit Bharat, it is very much possible. How I can say it is possible? Because look at China's performance. From 2000, in the year 2000, China was like India in 2022. In this graph, in the year 2000, China was similar to India in 2022. That means India is 20 years behind China right now. That means within 20 years, China could achieve that ratio 1. Within 20 years, China could achieve the ratio 1. That means it could make its share in world GDP equal to its share in population within 20 years. If you can achieve it, you are very close to achieving high income status. China is already reached that stage, very close, right? Because the high income threshold is $14,000. Chinese per capita income 12,600, very close. So if India want to achieve that, it is possible. In 20 years, it is possible. But we need to bridge this productivity gap. Now, what we need to do to bridge that productivity gap? So accelerating labor productivity growth is the key, right? So that should be our prime motive. So what way we should react to Trump tariff and all is secondary. This is our prime motive. And we should react keeping that in mind. Now, what did China do to achieve this? How did China achieve? Of course, they invested in infrastructure, they invested in human capital, education, etc. But then the stimulus for all that, the income for all that, where did it come from? You can invest a lot in infrastructure, you can invest a lot in higher education, skilling, etc. But you need income for that. Where did it come in the case of China? It came from exports. That is what this graph is showing. It mostly came from export. So what this graph is showing is the similar graph like the previous, but the only thing is that I am looking at share of world exports of goods and services of a given country divided by share in world population. So as I said earlier, India's share in world population is 18%. Our share in world export is around, export of goods and services together is around 3 point something percentage. So that means when you divide that by population, it is low. It is much lower than 1. This also should be close to 1. Vietnam has reached that stage, close to 1. That means their share in world export is very similar to their share in world population. China also achieved significant growth, even though it is not one. For a large country, it is not possible to reach one because there are non-tradables in the country. So it will not be able to reach one for a very large country, but it should, India should reach like what China has achieved here also. Then that will give us the resources and revenue to improve our infrastructure and to improve our skill of our people, and therefore to improve the labor productivity gap, which I said earlier, which is key for achieving the Vision 2047. Now, there is a confusion here. People say that, India is a large domestic market, so we don't have to worry much. This will happen. But as I already said, India is not actually a very large domestic market. We are big in terms of population, but we are not big in terms of purchasing power. We only account for 3.5% of world GDP, even though we account for 18% of world population. Not only that, domestic market is facing constraints. There is a paper by Arvind Subramanian and Chatterjee, Ashoka University working paper. They said that, showed that there is an increasing debt burden for households, firms, and government. They are the one, households, firms, and government are the one which create domestic demand. But they are in debt. Their debt is increasing. Firms' debt is increasing. Household debt is increasing. Government, many state governments are under debt. Central government debt is also increasing. So when all this is increasing, debt is increasing, how can you assure domestic demand as a source of your growth? It has limitations. So the way forward is to exploit the opportunity which are available in the large external market, which is, that basically means when we say that India's GDP in world GDP share is only 3.5%, that means 96.5% of the purchasing power exists outside India. 96.5% of the purchasing power in the world is outside India. If we don't utilize that purchasing power, then we are doing something not right. So that is what we need to fix. So we want to exploit that opportunity which are available there. There are difficulties, there are geopolitical factors, all those things are there, but we need to address that. That is the only way forward. If we want to achieve the objective of achieving Vision 2047. Now, how do we achieve it? The way to achieve it is participation in global value chain. Why I say like that? I say like that because we know from all evidence that about 2/3 of global trade is controlled by multinational companies. 2/3, big multinational companies. They control the trade and they operate their production through global value chains. They set up plants and their factories across the countries based on each country's cost advantages, comparative advantage, etc. So we have to be part of that global value chain network if you want to achieve this. Now, let me get into some bilateral trade perspective between India and China. There are a few graphs. After that, I will stop. So first is, this is US trade with India. How is it evolved over time? And I will give a comparative Asian perspective, few other countries, so that we'll get a comparative picture here. So what I have shown here is the US export share is on the left side. So US export share means out of total US export to the world, what share is going to each of these countries, including India. So US export for India, it has gone up from 0.5% in 1991 to 2%. This is what has happened. So there is a growth, but this growth is not a remarkable growth. Generally our trade share has gone up like this. So nothing remarkable about it. It's a growth which is proportional to our general trade growth has happened also with sorry, this is the on the US side, US export share. On the US import share means that is India's import, that is on the right side. So let us first look at the US export. How much US is exporting? So US is exporting 2% of their total export is going to India. 7% of their total export is going to China. 6% of their total export is going to ASEAN. 0.6% of their total export is going to Vietnam. That is what is on the left side. On the right side, it shows how much US is buying from these countries, their total import. So for India, it has gone up. It has gone up from 0.7% to 2.7%, which is slightly higher than what is India's otherwise general performance. So we are doing relatively better compared to our general trade performance in the US market. So it has gone from 0.7% to 2.7%. And you can see the big change for China. It has gone up to 22% by 2015. But after that, it became flat for a few years. And when Donald Trump came during his first term, it declined sharply to 14%. Now, which country gained from it? The main country that gained, the main group that gained from that was ASEAN. ASEAN countries gained from 7% to 11%. So there is a around 8% drop for China, but ASEAN gained about 4% of that 8%. About 50% of the Chinese drop was gained, ASEAN has gained. So India also gained, but very small, from 2% to 2.7%. Vietnam gained more. Vietnam is exporting twice that of India, roughly twice that of India, to the US market. So that means India-US trade is growing, but still below potential, with considerable room to expand in both directions, both on the export side and in the import side. So purely from a trade standpoint, the economic dependence of China, ASEAN, India, and Vietnam on the US market exceeds the US reliance on these economies. So that is another important takeaway from this graph. If you compare the left side and the right side, you can see that Asian countries' dependence on US is much stronger than vice versa, than US dependence on Asian countries as a market. That need to be taken into account. So we need US more than US need us. That is the situation as of now, from a trade point of view. That can be seen from the data here. Okay, now what is done here is that if you take US export share divided by US import share, US export share means how much US is exporting, what share to each country, divided by how much US is importing from each country. This is what bothers Trump. That is why I am showing this graph. The Trump tariff were triggered mainly by the values given by this graph. Because when he sees that US export is less than US import, he sees there is some trouble. There is bilateral trade deficit. Then he attacks that country with the tariff. So that is what is bothering him. Now here, if you look at India, the share is 0.74. And ASEAN, it is 0.55. China, 0.5. Vietnam, it is very low, 0.15. So Vietnam has no bargaining power at all with the US. So that is why they agreed with the zero tariff, right? Because for them, the US market is more important than, giving whatever sacrifice, whatever they are willing to give up their market, because they have much to lose if they don't give up. So that is why, so this ratio shows, if this ratio is greater than 1, Trump will not trouble. Assume, that is what we would expect. But here, in all these cases, the ratio is less than 1. So that is why he wanted to impose his tariff, basically thinking that this will correct, but it will not correct, as I already showed earlier. This is an analytically meaningless basis for any policy. But this is what is being driving or triggering all these policy actions from the US side. So while analytically it is unfounded, such tariffs are used as a pressure tactic to push countries into trade negotiations. So that is why what my interpretation is. It doesn't have any economic logic. No theory support this. No logic support, except that this is a pressure tactics. So these countries will come for a negotiation, give some, concessions and get a deal. Now, this is another important thing. I have only these graph, these and two graph. Yeah. So there's 3 graph. So this is bargaining power asymmetry, because we are all thinking about negotiation. So if you want to negotiate, what is our bargaining power vis-a-vis US? That is important. Then only they will listen to us. Now I am looking here the bargaining power of each country: ASEAN, China, India, and Vietnam. Now what is Trump's bargaining power? Trump's bargaining power is defined there. It is the share of the US market in country C's. Country C means any country that we are considering. It may be India, maybe China, ASEAN, or Vietnam, whatever, whichever country that we are considering. What is the share of the US market in, for example, India's total export to the world? That is Trump's bargaining power. So if China has a very large share of their export going to US, Trump has a bigger bargaining power with China, right? So what is country C's bargaining power? What is China's bargaining power? China's bargaining power is the share of country C's market in total US export. How much US is depending on China for their export? That is China's bargaining power. It's like that for each country. So when you look at that way, you can see that Trump's bargaining power is substantially higher than each one of these countries, ASEAN and China. And for ASEAN, China, Trump's bargaining power is more than twice, double. With China, it is twice, double. So he has a tremendous bargaining power with both these countries. Now, what about India? India also has a much greater bargaining power. With Vietnam, the bargaining power is the highest. He has 27.5%, but Vietnam has only 0.5%. For India, Trump has 18.3% bargaining power. That means 18.3% of our export is going to US. This is what we will lose if we don't sign an agreement, right? And on reverse, India's bargaining power is only 2%. Now, this is the final graph that I have. So this is the bargaining power asymmetry. What is done here is that a Trump dominance ratio is captured, which is Trump's bargaining power divided by country C's bargaining power. So if this ratio is greater than 1, that means that that much bargaining power exists for Trump, is available for Trump. And you see here, for India, Trump has very high bargaining power, 9. With China, it is 2.1. With ASEAN, it is 2.6, all greater than 1. That means he has a bargaining power. With Vietnam on the right-hand side, he has a tremendous bargaining power. That explains why Vietnam agreed for a zero tariff, because Trump has a huge bargaining power with Vietnam. We also have to give up. Otherwise, give up something. Otherwise, there will not be any negotiation. So now coming to my last way forward slide, what are the options available? One is strategic negotiation. That is, in my view, the best case scenario. Engage in reciprocal tariff negotiations modeled on India-UK FTA with appropriate modification wherever needed. Offer market access in sectors like defense and energy to incentivize US. Partners here means basically US here. Focus on mutually beneficial outcomes to lower average tariff rates. If we can get 15%, that is the best. 15% tariff, that is the best case scenario. So that is what one would expect as the best case scenario in this situation. Option 2 is a multilateral coalition. It is very ambitious, but it is very difficult. Explore a large-scale FTA with major economies, excluding the US, which include EU, China, ASEAN, India, Japan. So why is it so? Because the US account for only 15% of global trade. 85% of global trade is happening outside US. So if 85% of these countries come together, that means it's a win-win for all of them. It can create a substantial opportunities. Then option 3 is retaliation, which is the worst case scenario. Fortunately, it is avoided. There is no much discussion in Indian policy circle that we will retaliate. That is the worst case scenario. And finally, this is my final slide. But these negotiations are not enough. If we want to achieve what I said earlier, improving domestic productivity, that is the key. Then we need to do many things. Ease non-tariff barriers through regulatory simplification, streamline rules of origin to reduce compliance cost. India has a very stringent rules of origin requirement in its free trade agreements. Invest in infrastructure to lower logistics, strengthen interagency coordination for faster implementation and dispute resolution. Without robust internal reforms, India risks signing trade deals without truly benefiting from them. A coordinated strategy combining assertive global engagement with deep domestic reform is essential to integrate effectively into GVC and drive sustained export-led growth. I stop here. Thank you. I'm sorry if I have taken a little more time.
Thank you so much. I think it was very, logical and enlightening presentation. So thank you so much. So first, I think we'll cover all before I think we put it on discussion. So Professor Kulkarni, sir, your turn, please.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. Number one, Dr. Charan Singh, for inviting me because this gives me an opportunity to express my views for all of you and meet Charan after a long time and meet my friend Sweta after a long time too. So it's been a pleasure and newly meeting Dr. Veeramani and also Dr. Joshi. Well, with that, let me say first thing first, that it is a wonderful thing to see what Dr. Veeramani has said and have presented as far as the numbers are concerned. These are the numbers for which are not really new for the trade analyst for India as well as for outsiders, but they are very useful and they are very educational. I think the numbers are telling a secret of why is it that India's bargaining power is not as powerful with US, because we form a very small share of the total imports of US, and therefore the negotiations have to be in a direction where where India does not hold a very big part in bargaining power. Now, that point is very well taken, and other points are obviously have been hammered and proved for a very long time, that productivity growth is very important for economic growth. International trade is very important for economic growth. Openness is important. So, given the fact that the recent collapse of negotiations and the fact that we don't have as much negotiating power with US, what are our other options? And what our means India's options. And I think the other options are obviously not to focus on US market as much, which we, as it is, we don't, because as I said, for US, the share of Indian exports, namely about $187 billion worth, including the services of 100 billion in there, is a small number compared to the total imports of US, which are roughly $2.4 trillion. So clearly, our share is not that significant. So our options are, in a way, are very clear. Number one is that that we have to diversify. Number one, diversify not just in a product diversification, that we have to obviously start exporting different goods and increase the productivity, make innovation, find different products to export. And so there has to be some product differentiation in our trade on exports especially. And the second, I think, which is even more important, is that there has to be some regional diversification. That if not US, we need to search for other markets, and there are plenty of them. With world made up of almost 200 countries, US shouldn't be the destination for our exports all the time. EU is there, Japan is there, Southeast Asia is there, and Africa. I know we don't do a whole lot of trade with Africa, but that market can easily be exploited, just like China has been doing it in recent years. So 2 3 things are important for India to gain some bargaining power with US. Then we have to obviously increase our trade to other countries, whole lot more, dominate the markets as China has, and that is probably the only way in which we can catch up with a superpower. We can catch up with obviously China is far-fetched because the numbers are telling, as Dr. Veeramani showed many of those numbers here. So numbers are telling that we have a very long way to go. We have to work very hard for that. Coming to the policies of the current administration in US, I think there are 2 3 important points that are important. Number one is that President Trump has gotten, rightly or wrongly, but he has gotten few convictions in his mind. Number one, he thinks that because he is an elected president, whole America is behind him, and if not whole America, the majority is behind him. So whatever he does is supported by whole America. And I think his conviction is very clear that every time he speaks, he talks about a person who makes all the policies and the person who has a support of Americans to him, which, as I said, is wrongly or correctly, but he believes in that. The second thing he believes in, and he has said this several times before, that the assassination attempt on him was a failure because the God wants him to rule the world and make the policies for the world as well as for US. Essentially, making policies for US have reflections on policies for the world, and he believes in that. He has, as I said, he's so clearly whatever he does, and you can call it a dictatorial attitude, you can call it a superpower attitude, you can call it a bully attitude, whatever name you want to give it is fine. But then he does believe that he is in charge of making the policies. Whatever policies he make have a support of Americans, and well, mostly wrongly, but as I said, because of his complete faith in it, he thinks that any policy that he makes is a correct policy, including the policy of putting tariffs on the countries that he wants to put the tariff on. Now, let's not forget that that Trump has made this as a very big political tool, the tariff policy. Clearly, it is not an economic tool. Nobody in right mind, in rational economic sense, can argue that putting high tariffs will benefit the economy in the short run or even in the long run. And therefore, rational economists obviously have enough evidence to show that just like increase in trade is a sign of an economic growth, a reduction in international trade is a sign of economic slowdown. Now, every time the tariff negotiations do not end in a fruitful manner, the American stock market reacts to that so-called bad news in going down, and therefore the companies, the corporations, and businesses in India, in US, have shown it ample times that they don't really like this idea of having high tariffs that Trump administration is trying to impose all over. So those are my views. I think India has a good chance to get into a bargaining power in terms of reciprocal tariffs, and I think India has a good chance of diversifying its her trade to other nations in general, and dominate those markets rather than focus way too much on US, because given the fact that we obviously are not getting to any kind of negotiations and agreement with the US. So, but Dr. Veeramani made a very important point that US uh, does not need as much as India needs US as far as the market availability is concerned. And with that, I will stop and let my friend Sweta express her views, and I'll be happy to come back with. But most of my work is already done by Dr. Veeramani by putting those numbers up and and showing that it is very important for us to realize that not only in American trade, in the world as a whole, we still have a very long way to dominate the world. Okay.
Thank you so much, Professor Kulkarni ji. Thank you so much. So I think Dr. Sweta, you may have now. If your presentation is okay.
Sure.
Sweta?
No. Thank you so much, Dr. Joshi, actually, Professor Joshi, and thank you first, Charan, to invite me actually to be on this panel. Although I have to say that he had a lot of convincing to do, because I've been under the weather for the past week, and I said no, I don't want to be, but I'm glad that I am, and thank you, Charan, for pursuing and being so persistent about me being here. And it's good to see my dear friend Kishore after a really long time as we are talking. And thank you so much, Professor Veeramani, for your brilliant presentation, because you have put everything in perspective. Couple of things, everything probably I wanted to say has already been said, but still I'll try to make a few points. You know, as Professor Joshi started at the beginning saying uncertainty is the only uncertainty, is the only certainty. Yes, change is the only constant, as we always say. And you know, when you started off that there is a lot of stuff going around, India is a dead economy, and is it a dead economy or not? But you know what, recently we've seen what has transpired in India. Over the past, I would say about 2 months or 3 months or something like that, ever since Operation Sindoor, things have not been the same. And I just always wonder what exactly happened during Operation Sindoor, that things just turned completely flipped around in some ways or not. But it also actually has made India emerge. What I actually feel that India finally arrived, as one would say, you know, after Operation Sindoor, because it has become a much bigger player in geopolitics than I felt it was before. So let me actually start off with a couple of things that Professor Veeramani said. I completely agree with when he was talking about, you know, how trade deficit is not necessarily a sign of a weak economy and surplus of a strong economy. I mean, like, this is something basic 101 that I used to teach when I used to be in academics at one point in time. So points well made. And Professor Veeramani also made lots of great points about, like, you know, who has the big purchase bargaining power. One thing I would differ from Professor Veeramani when you said that India's domestic market isn't that great. I know, you know, Subramaniam and his buddies actually have this habit of actually, like, always, you know, downplaying anything that India actually has an advantage. But I actually have to say that, you know, China has always relied on exports. And you know, that is how it has grown. And most of the people don't realize China's entry into the WTO was the biggest shock the world has had, an economic shock that the world had ever seen. But nobody talks about it. China managed this entire process a lot better than actually India would be able to do it, because we all know for the longest time China did it because it used to manipulate its currency for the longest time. Pretty much not possible at this point for India to be doing something like that. And, you know, we keep actually talking about, you know, negotiations have broken down or whatever. Something has happened. I mean, like, you know, and I guess there's a joke, I think, if you see on social media going around a lot, India's bureaucracy, you know, how, how the negotiations haven't advanced as much as you would have expected, is how the Indian bureaucracy is. One of our biggest weaknesses has turned into actually a strength, where we are trying to frustrate the United States because, you know, we are not agreeing to what they want. But I have to say that India, I expect India to do better on these negotiations, because India has always been not so much about free trade, but about fair trade, which is something I support myself. And it has been a champion for fair trade since GATT days through the WTO. It's always supported the global South. And I think it should continue to do that. Right now, its own, you know, its own fight actually it's taking to the world in that respect. So I personally think that India should continue to actually negotiate on its own terms, while it might not have much of a bargaining power with the US right now, as Professor Veeramani was showing. But you also have to admit that only 15% of the trade in the world actually exports go to US, 85% go to other countries. And this is where India needs to diversify its partners. There is so much potential. We are already negotiating an FTA with EU, a post FTA with UK. We need to do more with Asia, ASEAN, Japan. And one of the untapped markets is actually Africa. Something that Prime Minister Modi has done actually by bringing Africa, you know, Africa is a close partner of ours, basically, because it was Prime Minister Modi who brought Africa into the African Union into the G20. If you remember 2 years ago when we were hosting the G20 meetings. So actually that is another potential market which we need to explore. But I think besides actually all this, you know, we do I think nobody talks about Kishore mentioned a little bit about how we need to diversify our exports as well. I mean, in terms of what we export, right? I think we do a lot of, at least to the United States, a lot of generic medicines and all. So tariffs are only going to make it happen more expensive for them. So I'm not so sure that's what Americans voted for with this administration. Having said that, but I think one of the other we need to also think about some of the other products in which we can diversify. And to me, what comes to mind, especially seeing what we have done in the defense sector, that should become a little bit of our strategic point, basically going forward, to be pushing our defense sector also and exporting our defense stuff. Especially it came big after, you know, basically the Operation Sindoor, if you remember. And I think most of the points I would have thought that this is an opportunity in adversity. It's a time for finding opportunity in adversity, as Prime Minister Modi always happens to find, you know, aapada mein avsar. So this is a pandemic moment. We can think of it as a 1991 crisis moment, you know, where you can actually do much more than you ever expected you could do. So some of the things have already been mentioned. We really need to at least unleash our businesses, basically improve our ease of doing business, something we are doing, improve our infrastructure, and also actually prepare a more educated and more productive workforce. I mean, like something so that all the foreign companies who've been eager to come will be more eager to come in rather than staying away from them. Because if tariffs are taking our competitiveness away, we need to actually ensure the competitiveness has to come through some other means, basically. So I've already talked about, so my big point actually still remains that this is a very crucial moment for India. Okay. And I personally think that as India is doing pretty well, it's not compromising its foreign policy, and it shouldn't. That is not, because, you know, there is a lot of pressure to actually cut off our ties with Russia, to do it with this and that. I mean, like, you know, and time and again we've seen who our strategic partners have been, who've been our more trusted partners. So it's a time to actually hold, pause, which I think which this present government is doing pretty well. They are not rushing into a negotiation saying, oh, you know what, we don't have any bargaining power, so let's just agree to whatever President Trump is saying. So I think this administration is dealing with this in a more, I think, in an adult way, which is what I think I expect. One of the last thing I want to make actually is that I think Kishore was making, I think the biggest problem with President Trump's take on this tariffs is why he's putting tariffs left, right, and center on different countries. Oh, you do this to us, 25 tariff. You get to 0 tariff, 15 tariff. Like, he's just sitting there, and as if it's it's sort of a basically some kind of a place where anybody can actually place wagers on the tariff rates. I think what his vision is actually for the US to get its manufacturing jobs back. And I really don't understand how can he get manufacturing jobs back in the US, even if he got them back. The question for everybody to think about actually is that who is going to work in those factories? I think Kishore might be able to. Will your Gen Z students work in those? Be happy to get those blue collar jobs from 9 to 5. Are these the teenagers who are going to be actually very appreciative of those kind of jobs or not? I mean, like, something to think about. We tend to romanticize the past a lot. I mean, like, yes, America grew with that manufacturing base after the Second World War, and you had these decent jobs where you had a great thriving middle class, but that's not the way to build that middle class anymore. And one needs to think about it. One needs to think about what are the kind of jobs that we need to create, and what are the kind of jobs, kind of workforce we need to prepare for those jobs. And these are, I think, bigger questions that all policymakers, including the people in the United States, need to think about. It's not just for us. So I'll just stop at this and take it up actually in our further discussion. Thank you so much, Professor Joshi, and thank you, Charan.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sweta. It has been, indeed wonderful. So I think two things comes from this is that Professor Veeramani has made it very explicit that, imposing tariffs on the imports would increase cost for the consumers, and under no circumstance it is going to give employment or the job in United States of America. And therefore, the important thing is, Professor Kulkarni also talked about is that tariff is being used as a political tool. And he was also, very categorical in talking about China's entry to WTO. So who made China's entry to WTO? It was US. India opposed, but US. And now it looks like a jinn has come out of the, this thing, and it does not control, so you put tariff. When, Professor Veeramani talked of, the market, services and goods could be 85, but when you talk only on the merchandise, India is incidentally having positive balance of trade, both services and goods. In terms of merchandise, China is having share of 14 to 15%, but US share in terms of export is only 8%. And therefore, again, but the import is maybe 14, so 85-86% market is outside America. And therefore, now the whole world is America, the whole world minus America. And all, deals are immediately getting galvanized, on urgency. Normally to strike an FTA, it take years, 5 years, 10 years, earliest deal which we signed with UK was 3 years. Now the entire, you are seeing all deals being signed are all one-sided. I am actually, baffled to understand that which trade theory says that to export to US you take 20%, but your country I want free, and not only free, but you need to buy defense, you need to buy aircraft, and you also need to buy oil, even if the price is very high. And I am buying from Iran or say Russia at a much lower price than I can buy from other sources, and you say to whom will you buy, to whom don't buy. It is probably the first time in the tariff is being associated with, you say, immigrants. Like you say Mexico, the high tariff because of immigrants. Then you say the tariff is fentanyl. Then you say 100% if you buy from Venezuela. Then you say if you buy from Russia is 500%. And then you say if you are part of BRICS is another 100%. So, the entire research is, baffled. So I would like to understand from, from each of, coveted economists as to how to our theoretical framework should fit into the present kind of a situation. Professor Kulkarni Sahab, you want to say anything on this? How should our theoretical framework incorporate these things?
Well, I agree with all the numbers that you just put as far as the tariffs are concerned. Well, mind well, I'm not here to support Trump policies. I'm not. I'm because, as I said, I'm one of those academicians who clearly understand that having more tariff doesn't matter unilaterally or bilaterally, is not economically welfare enhancing step for either side. And with that as a caveat, I clearly the behavior, the policy changes are absolutely mind-boggling, and they are irrational in many ways, and no matter how much he or his administration thinks it is a rational thing to do. And Shweta is right that by having a blockage of international trade, who are we creating the jobs for? There aren't that many Americans ready to work. There are plenty of jobs. The unemployment is only 3.5%. We don't need a help of a tariff to create more jobs, because there are no jobs to be created. Everybody, I think, is employed. So the absurdity of the tariff policy is well understood to my mind, and that's why I think you are right. It's indefensible step to talk about 100% and 200% tariffs with China and all that. But that's why I said that Indian options are to diversify the trade regionally as well as product wise. That innovation is important, productivity is important, finding out new products to dominate the world market is important. But let's not blame trade, or let's not glorify smaller trade as a way to go anywhere as far as the economic growth is concerned.
Excellent. And Professor Veeramani, I think you have shown extremely important things in the beginning, that import is not bad and why we require import and a theoretical framework. How do you look, these differential tariffs and number of unrelated economic things, coming into the play in the whole, tariff imposition days after days, and how do you think that we can integrate it into our theoretical framework? Veeramani sir.
Yeah, I don't think any theoretical framework can understand it. It is a purely, some kind of, I don't know whether there is some method in the madness, that I don't know. So maybe there could be some method. The method, only thing I can think about is, pressurizing countries to come for negotiations, and then show to the US public that he is doing a great thing for the US. But in fact, he is doing more harm than any benefit. But it's very difficult for common people to understand. But from a political point of view, he may be, I don't know whether he is gaining popularity, but the whatever news says that he is losing popularity, because ultimately this will show up. Right now, the disadvantage, the problems that it is creating is not showing up, mainly because there are many other things also happening simultaneously. Like, there is a huge investment taking place in AI, new technologies, and then there is a tax break, reduction in taxes and other policies. So because of all that, the economy is not fully, understanding the cost of what he's doing, but ultimately it will show up, and it cannot continue like this. But then I think this is short-lived. I don't think this will go on, because if it goes on, it is real madness. So I think it is just a strategic approach to pressurize countries to come and do a deal, so that there is some political gain that he gets, in terms of perception.
Thank you so much, Dr. Veeramani. Dr. Sweta, you want to say anything on this?
Actually, just wanted to say one thing. Somebody has written, Amita has written that on this question of bringing manufacturing back to the US, shouldn't it actually be according to, if that's the objective? I mean, like, you would think a reasonable person would actually put tariffs on the commodity, on the particular products that they want to manufacture at home rather than on countries. I agree with you, actually. I don't know exactly what but his whole point has always been, since his campaign has been that we want to bring these. China has been, sort of undercutting other countries. It's been trying to actually sell some of these products at a much lower cost, actually at a much lower price than it should. And to a certain extent, some of those objections are not unreasonable also. China has done that, okay? China has actually subsidized its exports in order to eliminate markets, in order to gain market shares. I mean, like China has done all sorts of things over the years. So not to actually downplay the fact that, China didn't do that. China did manipulate, okay, the entire world. But now what do we do now? Now at this point in time, what is it that you can bring back actually? And I don't know. I agree with you that should have been basically by products rather than by country, but he still thinks that he can bring some jobs back. I couldn't speak for President Trump though. Thanks.
Thank you, Sweta. And will you like to answer the next question, Professor Kulkarni ji? Khushu, it is
Yes.
coming. Please.
Which question?
This question from Mr. Khushu. Are we
Oh, well,
seeing
good.
the Indian money value depreciating to its lowest? Question is there.
1 second. Let me get to that.
Please.
Kushu. Yeah, here we go. Are we seeing the
I am
Indian
so
money
happy that
value
Donald
depreciation?
Trump himself has come. You guys are discussing about me. Chalo, carry on.
Yeah, actually, Indian money value depreciating to its lowest. So, based on today's topic, what is the underlying reason for it? Well, Indian value has been depreciating not just this year, last 10 years. It's been depreciating for last 50 or probably even more years. I know I left for India in 1976. $1 was 10 rupees that time, and now it is $1.87. So clearly, in last 50 years, there is 8 times depreciated Indian rupee. It will continue until our trade is completely open, which is still not open on the capital account as such. So when that happens, there might be even more depreciation and some capital outflow. Yeah, we haven't seen the end of depreciating Indian rupee. It has been there for all these years, and it will continue in the future as well.
Okay, thank you so much. And Kushu, your next question was that why India's share in export is so less. Our share in total export is otherwise less. It is somewhere between 2% in the world trade, and similar is in US. US is rather the largest market with 18 to 20% of the share. Dr. Veeramani, you want to say something on this question, the last part? Will such high tax will China help in India? Because whatever the tax is, it is also again short-lived, which other speakers have asked. Dr. Veeramani, aap bataiye.
Can you repeat that question, please?
No, I think the question is given, Mr. Khushu. What is given is why India? Will such high tax in China help and all sorts of those things?
Let me read that.
Please.
Can he read out that question? That will be. I am not able to see where.
No, I see. What he's saying is are we seeing the Indian money value depreciating to its lowest? So based on today's topic, what is underlying reason for this? Then another thing, I think these are very general. Carry on.
Okay, so I don't know whether this can be related to the Indian money value depreciation, because generally we see that movements happening even otherwise, up and down, various factors. So there is nothing particularly very concerning for India, even if it is 25%, even though it's a very number which is widely reported, 25% tariff, etc. But in terms of overall impact of that for the Indian economy, it is not that great. As a share of GDP, it's a GDP impact is not that high. So so I do not think there is any kind of systematic relationship can be drawn at this stage to the currency movements and the tariff. That we have to wait and see.
Very right. I think you can answer the last question also. that he's saying that, about the market diversification. Should they stay to the US market or diversify anywhere? You talked about, you can just briefly answer the last question.
So diversification is always a good thing to do, irrespective of whether we have to deal with this current situation or not, because the product level and market level diversification is always a good thing. And in trade literature, this is called extensive margin. So your growth, export growth can happen either along the extensive margin or along the intensive margin. So studies show that there is a study that I did earlier, decomposing India's growth along the extensive and intensive margin, and then comparing that with China to find out what explained China's growth, fast export growth, compared to India. And I tried to look at it in terms of extensive margin and intensive margin. So I find that for India and China, as far as extensive margin is concerned, we are not very different. The two countries are not very different. It is at the intensive margin that India is falling behind China. So the India-China gap in world market share is mostly because of the intensive margin, which basically means where we are losing out is not so much on diversification. Because we are there, we are producing many products and we have our presence in many markets, etc. That is not a big problem for India. Our big problem is the scale. We produce very little. We are not producing at the scale which is needed like that in China. China is producing at large scale. So that gives them a cost advantage. And therefore, they are able to export in large scale. Whereas in India, because of the intensive margin is low, our scale is low, we lose out. So yes, extensive margin, that means diversification is a good thing, irrespective of this thing. But I think India right now should focus also mostly on the intensive margin, which basically means specialization. We should produce in larger scale. And that is why I earlier said the GVC participation is important. And we have a very good example of how that strategy already worked in India very well. India's mobile phone export. India has become the second largest mobile phone exporter in the world during the last few years. It is not a something that happened over a long period. Just within the last few years, India has become the largest, second largest exporter. It is in China, Vietnam, and India, and now the report says that India has become the second. Now, how that happened? It happened because of that sector's very successful integration into GVC. How it happened? Because we got Apple, we got Samsung, we got the lead firms into the country, and we made a policy environment that is conducive for them to operate. The trade policy was an enabling one for them. Imported intermediate goods and parts and components were allowed with low duty. So all these allowed mobile phones to exploit its potential. Now, if we can replicate that success elsewhere, definitely in electronics, and then also in other places, other products, that is the way to go forward. That means it's a story of specialization. Now almost all Apple phones, which are iPhones, which are sold in the US, almost all, large part, in fact, the Apple, CEO mentioned recently, is made in India. So why can't we do the same thing in other electronic products? It is possible. So that is what I would suggest that India should do.
Thank you so much. But if you take, the smartphones, China's share in the US market of smartphone is almost 80-81%. India's share in the US iPhone market, smartphone market is almost 13-14%. So there is a lot of difference. Anyway, there are so many questions. So I will go to Dr. Charan Singh. If we can go ahead, or you want to close it now? If Dr.
No,
Charan
this
Singh
is a
can.
very interesting discussion. And if you all have time and you permit it, I know Professor Kulkarni has to start today. Veeramani has travel plans. So I leave it to you as chair, but I'm totally open to the idea of extending it because it's very interesting discussion.
I can stay for 10 more minutes. Then I have to leave.
Okay. So I think then you can. Shweta ji, boliye, Shweta.
Professor Joshi. Actually, I think Satish was asking that question, and I
Please.
kind of wanted to say that, where I had mentioned Operation Sindoor and, India's sort of changing, geopolitical thing, and India getting into the defense system. So he said some discussion on trade being used by Trump as a tool to stop wars can be examined. I think President Trump has been saying that he also said that he was using trade as a way to stop. He used
Shweta ji,
trade to
just related to the question, somebody has asked that, the data Dr. Veeramani shows is when the Trump has got so much of the bargaining power, then how it is a political tool. So you can answer this question along with what you are. I'm so happy that you are so passionate about India. Carry on.
So my point actually is that at most of the stuff that where I think recently his press secretary said that he stopped 6 wars in the last 5 months or something like that. So or 8 wars or something like that between Cambodia and Thailand and India and Pakistan and Ukraine and Russia and all sorts of things, right? So it was quite interesting actually that at the beginning what we were told, I mean, like right after Operation Sindoor, oh, I stopped the war between India and Pakistan, and now we're going to give a good trade deal, right? So there is something not adding up here. If trade deal was the reason why we stopped the war, but why aren't we getting the trade deal now? I mean, like, that's something to ask. I mean, like any reasonable person should ask. If that was the reason why we stopped, so why aren't we getting it? Why are we getting 25% tariff, right? All sorts of things. So I think what and some people are also asking, like, even if they want to bring manufacturing jobs back, they need actually machinery basically, which can only be imported from China. I mean, like, but this also kind of gives you a very simplistic way of thinking about using trade as an using this kind of a tactic of putting pressure on countries as an economic policy tool. It's a very simplistic way, and it doesn't actually bring everything together. So I think it's to a lay person, it might seem like, oh, they have the bargaining power, they can actually do that. As much as I totally agree with all the charts that Professor Veeramani has shown, that that US has a lot more bargaining power over India. I mean, like, but I still believe this is a very crucial moment for India. And this is a moment that India shall not pass. I mean, like, by just kneeling down and saying, okay, we'll do whatever you ask. No, India has a lot more capability than it thinks it does. And what we need to do is to exploit and unleash that potential that we have right now. So it's a great moment. It's I think in the short run we might have the pain, but I think what we will do and how we are going to respond to this current situation is going to determine the next 25 years or 50 years of what India would be like. And I think India shouldn't take this opportunity very lightly, in my opinion. But that's my personal opinion. Thank you so much, Professor
So
Joshi.
thank you so
Dr.
much. I'm so
Joshi,
happy about your personal opinion, and I also fully agree that when the people are commending him for the Nobel Prize, he stopped the wars, but nobody is giving him credit to initiate the tariff war or the trade war. So I think doubly he requires that must be commended. For anyway, so
Professor
the last.
Joshi,
Charat Singh,
Professor Joshi, before Veeramani goes, I want to pose a quick
please.
question. But continuing from what you and Sweta said, there is a Nobel Prize and there is exactly the reverse of the Nobel Prize too. And in a single year, one could get both of them. Okay, Professor Veeramani, my question to you is, I have always, apart from the equations that you showed and data-driven research that you have presented so beautifully, and then the arguments made by both Professor Kulkarni and Dr. Sweta, and of course the chair, I had a quick question for you. You know that America is a global power today. And as a global power, if you want to wield the sword and command that I should do this and I should not do that, and you have the commandments, should you not also have the global responsibility of ensuring enhancing welfare on the planet? Now, as students of international trade, three of you, and you especially, would you think there is a precedent in the history, in the trade history, where anybody has used trade as a weapon the way it is being used now? Related question, Professor Veeramani, is, as you know, the international trade, the way we know it, starting from Kindleberger, but most of it in the last 70 years, we have been trying to diversify trade and trade partners. And as Professor Joshi in his introduction mentioned, our understanding of trade in terms of Hexcher-Olin theory and those theories, are we not going to go back into a shell which is going to reverse global welfare? What would be your take on these two related questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Charan Singh, for that very relevant questions. So I completely agree with you at what you have in mind when you ask those questions. So definitely, there is no president who can think along those lines in the way that Trump is thinking. It's like you are destroying your own economy by doing this, thinking that at the same time portraying that it is, he's helping making America great again. But then this is something where the US role in the world economy is undermined, not only in terms of trade, but also, dollar as a currency is being undermined by these actions. The dollar has got its prominence mainly because of US as an open economy. Now, if US becomes a closed economy, and that is what he is trying to do, so he is undermining that power that the country is enjoying. So that way, definitely, apart from the usual welfare laws which we are all familiar with, because when because there was a question that is it political, or why is it political? If Trump is having so much bargaining power, why not it can't be considered as economic? It is still political. It cannot be economic. Why? Because bargaining power here means a completely different thing. This bargaining power, no economist take as real bargaining power. For Trump, it is bargaining power, because why he's doing this? He's trying to increase tariff. He has already increased the tariffs. The US tariffs are going up. In all these negotiations, he is not willing to, like, for example, Vietnam has agreed a zero tariff, and US has imposed still 19% tariff or something like that. Indonesia has agreed some lower tariff, but US has maintained 20% tariff. So whose tariff is going up? It's a US tariff that is going up. Other countries' tariffs are going down. So Vietnam is a beneficiary here. From a standard trade theory point of view, Vietnam is the beneficiary, not US. But Trump is selling the idea is that Trump is the beneficiary. How is that so? It cannot be, because when tariffs go up against the Vietnamese good, the prices of labor-intensive products which are coming from Vietnam in the US market will go up. The US households are going to pay for it. So how is it going to improve the welfare of the US? It is not going to improve the welfare of the US. So the policy that he is doing has no economic logic at all. It is purely political. Nothing else. I can't think, because if he is doing it the other way around, okay, you come, reduce your tariff to zero, I will also reduce my tariff zero, then I understand. That's a good policy. I will also reduce my tariff zero, you reduce your tariff zero, then he's doing a great thing for the world economy. He's making the world economy more open, but that is not what he's doing. He's making other countries cut down their tariff and increasing his own tariff. So in fact, other countries are benefiting from this. That is what I learned from any standard trade theory, because if you reduce your tariff, your welfare will go up. So Vietnamese welfare will go up. But many people are interpreting that Vietnam lost out in the business. No, Vietnam gained in the business. That's what my understanding is, because Vietnamese welfare is going to go up, right? Any welfare calculation, that is what it is. So, yeah, so that is what I want. I have to say here. Yeah. So the interpretation is very different because many people are interpreting it from the point of view, if you get more export market access, you are benefiting. That is a mercantilism, the old mercantilism theory. That's what everybody is thinking. They are all people are mercantilist. If you are exporting, if you are getting more export market, you are benefiting. If you are allowing more import, you are losing.
So I think it is the same thing which Donald Trump also goes only on mercantilistic and all theories failed.
He is also doing the mercantilist theory.
And how do you compare, say, the Vietnam, analogy with that of EU, where the products are very different? Because EU products also, again 15% and 0%. How do you compare this with Vietnam?
Okay, well, I need to leave in next 2 minutes, but
Okay, I think all of us can leave. Charan
Yeah,
Singh Saab, now you can close it up if you want.
Okay.
Just a minute, we can give 1 minute to Veeramani ji. Veeramani, batao.
Yeah, so there also that the EU, he has imposed imposed 15% tariff, right, against EU. That is what the US tariff is, 15% against EU. Is that is what you are saying?
Yes.
Yeah, so that is again US is losing out in that. But he thinks he is claiming that US has gained in it. But
okay.
Actually,
thank you, Veeramani sir. Thank you for challenging the most powerful man on the earth. With this, let's close. Charan Singh Saab, ab
Very
aap
good.
Thank you.
Professor Kulkarni,
Yes.
you raised your hand. Maybe you want to say
Yes.
something
Well,
before you
I
go?
will make 2 quick points. Number one, your question about was there any precedent about this? Well, nothing like this has ever happened in US. Anything that can come close to it is called a Smoot-Hawley Act of 1931, September 1931, presented by 2 senators, one named Smoot and Hawley, and that raised the US tariff to 33% on the average in 1931. And you know what happened after that, that the Great Depression got worse and 1933 became the lowest point of Great Depression. So clearly, anything like this has never happened before. If we continue with this, Dr. Veeramani is correct, then we may bring in a world recession or world depression, because this is classic case where a tit for tat makes all of us beggars rather than prosperous countries. That's my first point. The second point is that there is a good news. The good news is that nobody thinks like President Trump does, and unfortunately, his time will be over in 2.5 years. So hopefully, after 2.5 years, when we get a new president, none of these things will be continued, and mostly they will be reversed because there is enough intellectual challenge to all these policies. Very good. With that, I will finish my part. Thank you for having me again, and we will be in touch. Dr. Joshi, Dr. Veeramani, and Sweta, obviously. Take care.
So nice. Thank you.
I'm very thankful to you, Professor Kulkarni. You have raised this issue that after 2.5 years, the world will be sanitized. But your good friend Sweta is sitting next to you, and she will tell you that in her American Economic Review paper, she has come out with solid research which says that 2.5 years is long run for many of us. And in the long run, we are all dead. And many
No,
countries will be dead in 2.5 years. But
Yeah,
to
I don't have
summarize,
plans to die in 2.5 years, my friend.
but I don't either for 25 years. But Shweta's research in American Economic Review says that once there's a dent in growth, to cover up that dent in growth is going to take you a long time, because the trajectory has been dented. So for 2.5 years, if the world is going to suffer, then I think before that the global recession, the global depression will settle. In America itself.
Then again, he's so unpredictable that he may even reverse what he has been saying for last 6 months or so. So
I will do a yagya for that.
Yeah, I'm hoping for that.
If that can change his mind. But all I'm saying is that, as I understand from all of you, four of you, including Dr. Joshi as the chair, I understand that this has been a bad experiment. If ever it is a game theory which is being played out, it is a bad adventure, and this is not good for the planetary global welfare. I must also
And
mention.
I'll be happy to continue with this in another seminar also.
Sure. I would
Yeah.
be, I would like to share that we have had 5 webinars on Trump and tariffs in general took over. This is the 6th in the series, but this is the first one only dedicated to India because the hit has been too hard and the salt on the wound has been severe by that quote unquote dead economy comment. So that is why we did this webinar out of turn on a Monday. I must thank each one of you, especially all of you, given you such a short notice. Each one of you, especially Dr. Sweta, who was in a meditation camp, and I pulled her out and told her that her meditation is of no use if the country is going to suffer so severely. Happy she conceded and joined us. I also want to now make an announcement that on Friday, our regular webinar series day, this time we have a book being discussed, Everything All at Once, by Mr. Rajiv Kumar, former Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog. The timing is 3:30 to 5, and I would welcome you all to participate in this. I want to thank the participants for this webinar who have asked questions. We had nearly 114 people at one point of time. Once again, I want to thank each of the panelists, each one of you, and Dr. Joshi for agreeing to chair this session. With that, have a great evening and looking forward to hosting you again on Friday. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you.